I'm Ross Hudgens, founder of Siege Media. We're a content marketing agency that just hit the 100-person mark, and we help companies like Casper, TripAdvisor, and Shutterfly grow their business through search. Brian in particular does so many things impressively well, but what he has done really well is just the strategy of how to build a business from scratch. He came out of nowhere in the SEO scene and effectively started ranking for the most competitive terms, and he did it in a very intelligent way. And how he did that specifically is he focused first on building very high quality content, and then he tied in link building to that. And then from there, he always kept list building in mind to build a very massive audience through email that eventually could actually fuel his own link acquisition efforts without having to lift a finger nearly as much. So to put this in more detail, effectively, Brian, what he did from day one is very clearly care about getting more subscribers to his list. This allowed him to be scalable because as he built a massive compounding list, it allowed him to eventually get to a place where he was distributing his content to hundreds and thousands of people by simply sending an email. But that said, if you're a new business and you're starting from square one, you can't necessarily do these same things that Brian did. What Brian did in those stages is he actually used link building expertise and the own lessons that he shared with his audience to do manual outreach and get things ranking through the very high quality content he created on backlinko.com. But as he did that, there are several techniques that he leveraged that you can also leverage to build your business and newsletter. As you can see on his website, specifically on his homepage, he has great calls to action, and he makes the focus of the homepage actually getting your email through the value he's going to be bringing in his list. There's also a call to action to get on the newsletter in his header, as well as the footer. And also on the About page, you will see several more actual calls to action to grab emails. And if you dive into his blog as well, you'll notice there are several different areas to actually download resources that are non-intrusive, they're well done, they look great, and they will actually get you and persuade you to sign up to his list and then get distributed that great content over time. And on top of that, a very common technique that Brian used, especially in his early stages, was the idea of the content upgrade. And Brian actually popularized this term, which we'll discuss later. But effectively, this idea was a downloadable, maybe a checklist, a bigger version of the guide, a PDF, got people to give their email address to him in exchange for that work. And that would drive up his list significantly. We've used this at Siege as well at times. It has increased our list in exponential fashion additionally. And Brian has used this in a repeat fashion. He basically built a scaling business where each asset had a new version of this upgrade. He had these calls to action around the site. And you can see how as things start ranking, he naturally is building a massive compounding snowball of list acquisition that has powered his ability to market to hundreds of thousands of people as his company got going. And of course, he couldn't do that from day one without actual ranking. So we did that through high quality content and the manual lift to do that. And that is our suggested strategy as well. If it's possible for you, build that compounding value through manual nudging your content through link building and distribution with the aim to get enough distribution levers to actually get rankings going without having to do manual outreach down the line. This is effectively being a brand, and it is the advantage that getting to that brand stage will actually get you. As we touched on with the content upgrade, another thing that made Brian very popular in the early days is just how good of a marketer he is. It's not just that he can create high quality content and search, but he actually took ideas that weren't necessarily new in the SEO world, but he actually put names to them, made them branded, and those things actually made the ideas take off and do extremely well. So an example of this is a skyscraper technique. This is now referenced throughout the SEO world, effectively the idea being that if you have a piece of content online, how you want to rank is make a taller skyscraper that makes that asset better than everything else ranking for that topic in order to rank. So this wasn't necessarily a new thing, but he called it the skyscraper technique, and now it's stuck with everybody in terms of how to do that. Naturally, this has also generated a ton of links as people reference that idea for Brian. Other things he's done here are actually the thing I referenced previously, the content upgrade. He also popularized that idea, as well as another one called the movie man method, where if you see a site goes down, you can actually reach out to those websites and get them to link to you instead. So this was actually a very early popular growth technique for Brian, in that blueglass.com, a former agency that was very popular in the early days of my SEO career, that site went down, and a lot of their content went down, and he had good comparable assets. So he reached out to those businesses and got them to link to him instead because he had high quality content that could do that. That's just another tip on top of this, but he called that the movie man method. Now people have referenced that, and that's yet another highly linkable technique that people think of Brian for and link to his website, which in turn continues to build that snowball that Brian has built over the years. So something that relates to the movie man method that Brian has also done is he has thought about buying other businesses and redirecting them into his site. So Brian actually took the very popular link builder John Cooper's website, Point Blank SEO, and he purchased it from John and redirected some of that content into his own site. An example of this is link building strategies, which he has up on his business. And this is an example of taking advantage of a semantically similar site to his, which was about link building. That's kind of how Brian started as well, was focused on link building. And he identified this as a highly authoritative site, not really being used by John anymore. And I can move this content into Backlinko and hopefully have a beneficial outcome for both parties in doing so. So Brian very intelligently kept his eye and ears on the ground for those kind of opportunities, both with the Blue Glass example previously and also the John Cooper example here. So for you in particular, your industry is different, but that idea can percolate for you is who has relevant content to your business at different stages in the life cycle of your company. People will go out of business, they'll not care as much, stop being active. And what you want to find the connection to is that business being monetized currently, plus does it have a lot of links? And that is kind of the intersection. There are plenty of websites out there that for whatever reason aren't being monetized. They might have monetized in some other way, such in John's example, he was doing services, but he stopped doing that actively. So therefore that website wasn't that valuable to him anymore. And there's examples of that in every industry, whether it's a free tool or maybe another personal blog that someone had. They have value from that link, but because they're not being monetized, you can potentially acquire them and get good value. So that is something that Brian has leveraged both in the Blue Glass example and in the John Cooper example. And it's very possible he's had other ones as well, but those are some good takeaways to potentially think about for your business too. Another thing Brian does especially well that I think is world-class is his copywriting. So if you look at any of Brian's posts, something you'll notice is he effectively uses the A.I.D.A technique. So if you're not familiar with the A.I.D.A technique, it's attention, interest, desire, action. The most important piece of this technique, in my opinion, is always that attention piece. It's effectively writing a very compelling first two sentences. So if you pull up any post by Brian, you'll see he's always hitting you with credibility in those first two sentences. And he has seen that if he can grab you with those first two sentences, you're way more likely to read the rest of the post. But from there, Brian is taking that same idea and it goes throughout the post. You can see in the way Brian writes, he's taking very deep thought about every sentence in terms of, is it too long? Is it too wordy? Is it punchy? He'll do very small paragraphs that make it more scannable on average. And Brian's copywriting techniques are part of the reason he is so successful. And specifically that A.I.D.A format, which I suggest looking into for your own business, is just a compelling way to continue to drive value for your business. So I definitely suggest checking out Brian's SEO copywriting post that details more of the same things that I'm describing that have actually allowed him to power to these great rankings and results for his business. Another thing Brian has done recently well is think about the hub and spoke model. This was popularized by HubSpot, but Brian originally put out these very long form articles, really in depth, high quality. They had infographics, and he still does those, but he's smart enough to know when that's not required. So in some situations, he has these hubs. He'll have a YouTube marketing hub, and within that, there will be several smaller articles on different pieces of YouTube and how to do YouTube effectively, how to grow your presence. And of course, he does have the credibility of having an absolutely massive channel as well. You can see in digging into this, he's done a great job of understanding when he can take that same skyscraper technique we talked about earlier and apply it on a macro sense when micro isn't possible. So if you're talking about a very small element of YouTube, it might not be possible to skyscraper that piece. But what makes his specific hub section better is that he gives you all the solutions that that person is thinking about, effectively giving them task completion of how to run an effective channel from a marketing standpoint. And that is what Brian is intelligent enough to understand. So for you, if you go and think about your own business, maybe there are these micro topics that you struggle differentiating how you can make it significantly better than the rest of the results there are. simply because it's a simple question that someone is asking. How you can do that is help them solve for a more elegant task completion by going for the macro. What is the problem this person's trying to solve at the high level? And in Brian's instance, he's identified it's marketing, it's growing the channel, it's being effective through YouTube. And that's why this entire hub, well organized, allows him to do that. And of course, there are SEO benefits to this as well. They all interlink to each other. They get links, and that links pass to the other ones. This does have clear SEO benefit as well that Brian has gotten leverage from by building these hubs, in addition to his great long form articles on Backlinko. And finally, something Brian does very well is now that he's built that audience and ranking potential without having to lift the manual finger, he's started to scale out these data point reference pieces. So an example of this is he has posts on social media users and also Snapchat users. And he also has statistics posts as well. And these topics in general, where someone wants a specific number, whether it's a data point or a number of users, they are often great passive link intent topics. So Brian has done a great job of building high quality assets tied to these things. And he likely knows that people that sign up for his course, which is his main business model, but they will drive links to the business, which will in turn generate momentum in lots of other different ways for Brian. So to kind of sum it up, Brian just absolutely crushes, and have a ton of respect for what he's done in a very competitive industry, competing with the likes of Ahrefs, SEMrush, Moz, and to do it as a single person with some contractors, that is just beyond impressive. And there's so many lessons to learn, not only in his content, but from Brian himself and how he has grown his own business that hopefully you can take forward with yourself as well. So if you dug this video and you want to get more, hit that notification bell to get notified of upcoming videos just like this. We're going to be breaking down the world's best organizations from SEO and content marketing standpoint, and definitely jam that like button to tell YouTube that you dug this video. So thanks for watching.